begun. The evidence seems to be a 10, 8 to 10 weeks and maybe more to come. Diddy defense says it's mutual. Tough love, the feds say it's way beyond just two cuddle doves. Diddy says he is love, love, love. Diddy defense team got 8 on the move. Agnafalo, Garrigo, Shapiro, Steele, Donaldson, Westmoreland, Esteval, and Driscoll. The feds got him on 5 charges. They say he on that RICO. Media says he is guilty out the gate. 8 male jurors and 4 women hold his fate. No cameras allowed in the court. Content creators screaming more, more. Family arriving in all black. Victims' families sitting in the back. Media saying the feds got it in the sack. Official transcripts will show the full story. Full statements, but the details may be gory. Victims' names not being used to keep from getting approached by the accused. Did the feds charge Diddy for his crimes or just for some freak off good times? Baby, oil galore, but the feds say there is much more. This trial is sure not to be a bore. Everyone has seen the famous video, but there's more we don't know. Everyone is innocent until proven guilty. This will be left to the 12 on the jury committee. Infamous Sylvia is boots on the ground, out there on the media crowd, hearing all the murmurs and rumors flying all around. Independent press is better than the rest. Can they pass the test? Infamous Sylvia has it all. Live on site to read in the transcripts at night. Subscribe and like. There's no one like her inside. Did he do what they say? Will NYC jail be where he stay? Will the defense be able to provide reasonable doubt? We got the transcripts to act out. Infamous Sylvia will be there throughout. Will the bad boy for life be serving life? Or will he get the win and be in the next jet to Berlin? Is he innocent or guilty? We wanna hear your theory. Baby, oil galore, but the feds say there is much more. This trial is sure not to be a bore.
Hey guys, hello everybody. Y'all like that new song that I just set up for? Shout out to CMT. She did that song for us. That is a song for us to use for our transcript reading. Hello everybody. Welcome to Infamous Sylvia channel. Hello, hello, hello. Hey guys, and don't talk about that curtain over there. Don't talk about my sister curtain. Don't do that. Don't do that. We're not doing that, okay? Shout out to all of you guys for being here tonight. Well, guys, we're running a day behind because yesterday I was so freaking tired, so I didn't get a chance to read the transcript, and I got it last night. I just wanted to sleep. So what we're going to do today, we're going to go back the day before. This will give you guys a chance to marinate on what happened today in court. So without further ado, guys, I have my readers. Miss Mimi. Hello, Mimi.
Hello.
And we have Tiara. Hello, Tiara.
Good evening.
Good evening. All right. I needed one more reader. Anybody want to volunteer? And look, when you volunteer, you get a chance to get a copy of the transcript. Anybody want to volunteer and be a reader tonight? Anybody want to volunteer? Oh, do I have to voluntold y'all? Do I have to voluntold you guys? Shout out to X. X, come on over to YouTube. I'm about to end X over there because I need you guys over here on YouTube. Come on over to YouTube. This was a temporary. So X, come on over to YouTube and watch the live here. All right. Okay, you guys ready? Anybody twice? Stephanie, are you on? Come on, Stephanie. Come on, Stephanie. Stephanie, where are you? Stephanie has the transcript already. I send it to her and I asked her to read. She says she's nervous, she's shy, but we're not gonna take that shyness. All right, but we're gonna go ahead and get started because it's gonna be a lot. All right, you guys. Thank you, everybody that's coming in. Make sure you hit the like button and share, and we're gonna go ahead and start this rolling. From now on, we're going to have our readers ahead of time because this is like killing time trying to get somebody to come in. All right, let me go ahead on and start. All right, let's rock and roll, people. Let me get myself off the screen. All right, Tiara, you know you're the prosecution. You start first. So let me go ahead on and do the opening. All right, y'all ready? Let me put my little thing up. Just 1 second, y'all.
Sylvia, I might need you to send a link to my as a text message because I can't get out of here and go to my email.
All right, here we go. Okay, I just sent it to you. All right, guys, let me just go ahead on. Thank you, Tiara. Thank you, Mimi, for the volunteering. Thank you so much for your help. All right, let's go ahead and get started. Let me share this. Okay, let's get started, people. All right. United States District Court, Southern District of New York, United States of America versus Sean Combs, aka Puff Daddy, aka P Diddy, aka Diddy, aka PD, aka Love. 24 CR 542 AS. And this is the trial. Let us begin. Mr. Agafalio. Mimi?
I'm coming. One thing on the record, the court's record, I'm happy to do it on the record. I'm going to ask that victim number one, when she testifies, be already in the jury box when the jury comes in, only as to her, only because of her physical condition. I mean, there are certain things we can't control about a juror who is 8.5 months pregnant. But I think there is a quality to her walking in front of the jury that I think is easily avoidable. I'm not making an application for any of the other witnesses.
Wait, let me make sure I understand.
Yes,
Miss Comey, who is your first witness?
First witness is Israel Flores.
That's what I thought. When we get to the third witness, which is Miss Ventura,
Correct, Your Honor.
when we get to our third witness, just for purpose of that witness,
yes,
You would like her to be already sitting in the witness box
Yes,
when the jury come in?
correct.
All right. Let me think about that.
Your Honor, we will object. If Your Honor is considering it, I would like to be heard on that. I don't think there are any basis to treat any witness differently because of a medical condition, most notably pregnancy. I think that would be deeply inappropriate.
I can make the application. It doesn't have to be done now. It can be done before she testifies. Anytime good for the court.
I'll think about it. Miss Comey makes the point. We wouldn't treat people differently based on any other sort of medical condition or physical impairment or any other attribute, all right? Why would we treat her any differently?
Because I think there is a prejudicial quality. Pregnancy is beautiful and wonderful. It is also a source of potential sympathy.
They're going to see the witness.
100%.
Aren't they going to see the witness leaving the witness stand? Why? What are you trying to achieve?
Well, so in past trials, and each trial is different, I've certainly had situations where the jury was excused before the witness either sat down or left the witness stand. And I would make the application for all the witnesses, except I think it takes a certain little bit of more time. So I wasn't going to do that in the interest time. I've always preferred the procedure where the witness is seated, then the jury comes in. I've probably had most of my trials with that as the process.
Well, the court does that too when it fosters efficiency. I'm sure that we will actually do that at this trial. But you're making a different application. You're saying we will. In fact, we have the witness seated whenever the juror comes in, and there is an objection to that. And it's a fair one. That I didn't know what that there is any support anywhere. Oh my God, this dog. In the history of America judicial precedents. You can find that for me. You've got time. I've heard the objection. I tend to agree with it. However, you've got until the afternoon because this isn't going to happen. If it happens today at all, I think you got some time. If you have any support for that, I'm happy to take a look at it. Your Honor, we can go off the record. Mr. Courtroom Deputy, are we ready to proceed? Yes, Your Honor. I will check on them right now.
Your Honor, I'm sorry. Can I just put one thing on the record?
Yes.
We just want to note to supplement the Batson application, which we understand Your Honor has denied, and in addition to the points where Mr. Agnifilio made, that two of the black individuals the government struck, number 161 and 163, were the only two black men in the first 28.
All right.
Your Honor, I don't think that's right. In the first 28?
In the first 28.
That's what?
I don't think that's right. And if I could correct the record, juror number 184, who was on the jury, I believe, is a black man.
Well, I think we have the government's response. Ms. Comey, do you have anything further to respond to Ms. Shapiro's submission?
Your Honor, I would want the record to also reflect that there were other men who weren't non-white men also seated on the jury. I think I noticed that, but given
I don't think that's correct, but
All right. I understand that you've supplemented the record. Ms. Comey has responded and the Basin application continues to be denied. So, with that, at this point, Mr. Courtroom Deputy, we are prepared to bring the jury. Yes, Your Honor. All right, let's bring the jury. Please be seated. Your Honor, I confirm I have the jury seated in the correct position. Are you juror number 2? Are you juror number 2?
yes,
Are you juror number 5?
yes,
yes,
Are you juror number 25?
yes,
Are you juror number 55?
yes,
Are you juror number 58?
yes,
Are you juror number 75?
yes,
Are you juror number 116? Thank you. Are you juror number 160?
yes,
Are you juror number 184? Are you juror 201? Number
correct,
201. Are you juror 217?
yes,
Proceeding to the the last row, are you juror number 230?
yes,
Are you juror number 234?
yes,
Are you juror number 292?
yes,
That's why we do this. Are you juror 292?
yes,
Great, thank you. Are you juror 321?
yes.
Are you juror 330?
yes.
Thank you. Your Honor? Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for bearing with us through the jury's process. Welcome back to the United States District Court for the Southern District of New York. Are you, as you are told, when you were here for jury selection? I am Anron Sebastian. I don't know how to say my own name. I will be presiding over the trial in this case, United States of America versus Sean Combs. Trial will begin shortly with opening statement. We will sit every weekday until trial is over, with the exception of court holiday. Our anticipated schedule has not changed since we last spoke to you. The attorneys and I expect this trial to be over before July 4th. Obviously, if it's possible that the trial goes longer, but I don't expect it will. Every day this week, we will be here at 9:30 a.m. and 5 p.m. After this week, we will go to 9 a.m. and to 3 p.m. each day. We will try to make your trial experience as smooth and pleasant as possible. If any issue come up, please contact the court's deputy. A light breakfast will be available for every trial day in the jury room at 8:30. And I encourage you to arrive early so as to not delay the other jurors and the participant in this trial. We will take a shorter than usual break for lunch. I'm anticipating about 30 minutes, but we will have lunch provided for you in the jury room, so you don't need to leave the courthouse and take the additional time. Now, the reason why we will have in the middle of the day is that you can leave early most days. That is the point, so that you can have more time to attend to the things you need to do in life while we're conducting this trial. Of course, if you need a break during the proceedings for urgent personal reason, you should let the court deputy know. But I will make every effort to move this trial along promptly and make efficient use of our time. Now, the name and identities of the jurors are known to the court and both parties, who will keep your name and identity in confidence. In order to protect your privacy, that personal information about you will not be disclosed to the public. This is in no way unusual. It is a common practice following any case in the federal courts that is being followed here in this case. The courtroom deputy will now swear the jury. Is there anyone in the jury who cannot swear or on oath but affirm? Put your hand down for a minute. Is there anyone who does not take an oath? You can raise your hand again. A jury of 12 and 6 alternate was impelled and sworn. Now here's the judge. Now, members of the jury, now that you have been sworn, I will give you some preliminary instruction to guide you in your participation in this trial. To begin with, you are here to administer justice in this case. According to the law and evidence, you are to perform this task with complete fairness and impartiality, and without bias, prejudice, or sympathy for or against any of the parties. It will be your duty to find from the evidence that the facts are. You and you alone will be the judge of the facts. You will then have to apply those facts to the law as the court will give it to you. You must allow the law whether you agree with it or not. Nothing that I say or do during this trial is intended to indicate or show to be taken by you as indicating that your verdict should be, what your verdict should be. The evidence from which you will find the facts will consist of the testimonies of witnesses, documents, and other things received in the record as exhibits, as well as any facts that the parties agree to or stipulate to that the court may instruct you to find. Certain things are not evidence and must not be considered by you. I will list them for you now. First, statements, arguments, and questions by lawyers are not evidence, nor are any of my own statements to you. Only the answer given by the witnesses and the documents admitted as exhibit are evidence. Second, objections to questions are not evidence. The lawyers have an obligation to their clients to make an objection when they believe evidence being offered is improper under the rules of evidence. You should not be influenced by the court's ruling on objection. If the objection is sustained, ignore the question. If it's overruled, treat the answer like any other. If you are instructed that some items of evidence is received for limited purposes only, you must follow the instruction. Third, testimonies that the court has excluded or told you to disregard is not evidence and may not be considered. Finally, anything you may have seen or heard outside the court is not evidence. It must be disregarded. You are to decide the case solely on the evidence presented here in this courtroom. When you are determining the facts, keep in mind that there are two kinds of evidence: direct and circumstantial. Direct evidence is direct proof of a fact, such as testimony of an eyewitness. Circumstantial evidence is proof of facts from which you may infer or conclude from other facts exist. The word infer, or the expression to draw an inference, means to find that a fact exists from proof of another fact. An inference is to be drawn only if it is logical and reasonable to do so, and not to by speculation or guesswork. In deciding whether to draw an inference, you must look at and consider all the facts in light of reason, common sense, and experience. Whether a given inference is or is not to be drawn in its entirely a matter for you, the juror, to decide. Circumstantial evidence does not necessarily prove less than direct evidence, nor does it necessarily prove more. Here is an example to help you think about the difference between direct and circumstantial evidence. Assume that when you came into the courthouse this morning, the sun was shining and as it is outside, and it was a nice day outside. Also, assume the courtroom blinds were drawn and you could not look outside. Assume further that as you were sitting here, someone walked in with an umbrella that is dripping wet. And then a few moments later, someone walks in with a raincoat that was also dripping wet. Now, because you could not look outside the courtroom, you couldn't see whether it was raining. And because no witness has testified that it was raining, you would have no direct evidence of the facts. But it was raining. But on the combination of facts that I have asked you to assume, it would be reasonable and logical for you to conclude that it was, in fact, raining. That is also there is to circumstantial evidence. You inferred the basis of reason, experience, and common sense from the one established fact, the existence or the non-existence of some other fact. I'll give you further instruction on these, as well as other matters, at the end of the case, but keep in mind that you may consider both kinds of evidence. Now, on one of the most important tasks as a juror is to evaluate the credibility of witnesses who will testify before you. That is, how truthful and believable they are. Listen carefully to each witness testify during both direct and cross-examination, and consider whether the witness is telling the truth. It will be up to you to decide which witness to believe, which witnesses not to believe, and how much of any witness's testimony to accept or reject. Now, how do you decide what to believe and what not to believe? You are to listen to the witnesses, observe their testimony, and decide as you would decide some questions in your own life. Did they know what they were talking about? Were they candid enough, honest, open, and truthful? Did they have a reason to falsify, exaggerate, or distort their testimony? Sometimes it is not what a witness says, but it's how he or she says it. That may give you a clue as to whether or not as to accept that witness's version of an incident or an event as credible or believable. In short, the way a witness testifies may play an important part in your reaching a judgment as to whether or not you can accept the witness's testimony as reliable. You may hear from law enforcement officials in this case. The fact that a witness may be employed by a law enforcement official does not mean that his or her testimony is deserving a greater or lesser weight than that of an ordinary witness. You may also hear two witnesses testify using pseudonym. That is not using their real name. The government, the defense, and the court, and you, the jury, will know their real name, but the name will not be used in public court solely to protect the privacy of these individuals from disclosure to persons who are not parties to this case. The fact that a witness is testifying using a pseudonym does not mean that his or her testimony is deserving a greater or lesser weight than any other witnesses. Now, a few words about your conduct as a juror. I gave each of you the following instruction when you were here for jury selection last week, but I will repeat the instructions now because they are extremely important. I am counting on each and every one of you to follow them. First, during the trial, you are not to discuss the case with anyone, nor are you to permit anyone to discuss it with you. This includes posting anything on the internet about this case, whether it is on Instagram, Facebook, X, or any social media platform or website. Until you retire to the jury room at the end of the case to deliberate, you simply are not to talk about this case with anyone, including your spouse or partner, family, or close friend. Do not even to discuss the case with each other until you begin your actual deliberation at the end of the trial. Second, please do not, while you are serving as a juror in this trial, have any conversation with the parties, the attorneys, or any witnesses in this case, whether in the courtroom, in the hallways, in the elevator, outside, or anywhere else. I mean, not only to avoid talking about the case, do not talk at all. Even to say good morning or acknowledge any of these people. Someone seeing a juror in conversation with a party, lawyer, or witness might think that something improper was being discussed. To avoid even the appearance of an impropriety, avoid any such contact or conversation. I can tell you that when the parties, witnesses, and lawyers pass you in the hallways without even acknowledging your presence, they do not mean to be rude. They are simply following my orders because I have ordered them not to talk to you. Now, third, do not read or listen to anything outside the courtroom that relates to this case in any way. You are not to allow anyone to speak to you about this case. If you are approached by anyone to speak about it, politely but firmly tell them that the judge has directed you not to do so because I am ordering you not to do so. If any person seeks to contact you about this case, you are required to report the incident promptly to me by sending me a note through my court deputies and through the jury office. Also, be sure that I am informed if any person that you know comes into the courtroom. This is a public trial, so it could happen. But it is important that you do not hear from them what they might have happened in the courtroom while the jury was not present. If you should see a friend or a relative come into the courtroom, please send me a note through the deputy at the first opportunity. Fourth, do not try to do any research or make any independent investigation about the case or the issue brought up by the case. Do not go on the internet tonight and research any matter relating to this case. Do not call up a lawyer friends and ask about the type of matter at issue here. Fifth, I know many of you use cell phones, laptops, social media, the internet, and other tools of technology. You all do. You must use these tools to communicate electronically with anyone. You must not use these tools to communicate electronically with anyone about the case. This includes your family and friends. You may not communicate with anyone about the case on any technological device, including through email, text messages, or any social media website. Finally, do not form an opinion until all evidence is in. A case can only be presented step by step, witness by witness, until all the evidence is before you. Keep an open mind until you start your deliberation at the end of the case. Now, you are permitted to take notes during this trial. The courtroom deputy has given each of you a notepad and a pen. Please write your name on it or your jury number, on the cover of the pad. Do not write your name, just the number. If you do take notes, please do so only on these pads. Remember that any notes you take for your use only, and they are to be used as an aid to your memory. Your memory controls. If you do take notes, be careful not to get so involved in note taking that you are not listening to the evidence. Once you are in your deliberation, if there is a disagreement between one juror's note and another juror's note, or between one juror's note and another juror's recollection, you can ask to have the court reporter read back the testimony, or to have that portion of that transcript sent to you, for it is an official court transcript that controls not any particular juror's note. During the course of the trial, exhibits will be received into evidence. They will be marked by an exhibit number. If there is an exhibit that you are interested in seeing during your deliberation, or you think might be interested, just write the number of that exhibit number. At the end of the trial, as you begin your deliberation, we will provide each of you with a list of all the witnesses who testify, as well as a list of all the exhibits that you have received into evidence. This will be a lengthy trial with many exhibits and witnesses, but please do not hesitate to request as much material as you need when you are in your deliberation. We will now begin the trial. As I told you earlier, the trial is expected to be done in 8 weeks. This week will begin each day at 9:30. Please be on time to help ensure we start on time. Please be in the jury room at 9:15 at the latest, so we can begin without delay, starting next week when we begin at 9 a.m. Each day, I will ask you to be here in the morning by 8:45. The key thing is that nobody is late. If any of you are late, we will have to wait. We can't start until you're all here. And all of us will have to be kind of cooling our heels until you arrive. And if we lose 10 to 20 minutes each day, we might not be able to complete on time. It might go past July 4th, which nobody wants. Now, let me tell you how the trial will proceed. First, we will have opening statement. An attorney for the government will make an opening statement. Then an attorney for the defense will do so. The opening statement are neither evidence nor arguments. They are simply outlines of what the attorney believes the evidence will show, and they will be given to help you follow the evidence as it is presented. After opening statement, the government will present its case, and the government will call its witness. And after each witness testifies, the defense will have an opportunity to examine the witness. If that witness is also one of the witnesses the defense will call, the defendant may also examine that witness on matters relevant to its defense so that the witness does not have to testify twice. Following the government's case, the government will rest. The defendant will then have the opportunity to present a defense case should he choose to do so. The defendant here is under no obligation to present a defense. The burden remains at all time on the government to prove the elements of each offense beyond a reasonable doubt. Should the defendant present a defense case, any remaining defendant witnesses will testify, and the government will have an opportunity to cross-examine them. After the evidence is completed and all sides have rested, the attorney will give their summation. This is the opportunity for the lawyers to summarize the evidence and give their closing arguments. Following the summation, I will give you instruction on the law, and you will then finally retire to deliberate your verdict. I know this will be a long road, but I want to emphasize that you have a tremendously important task as jurors. It is to determine the facts. You and not the court are the sole judges of the facts. The Constitution itself recognizes your unique role in our system of justice. So please pay careful attention to the witnesses and evidence received at trial, as well as my instruction on the law. Thank you for your commitment. Thank you for your commitment to performing this civil duty and recognize the sacrifices that you have all made to be here today. We will now begin opening statement in the government. Is the government prepared to proceed?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right. You may proceed.
This is Sean Combs. To the public, he was Puff Daddy or Diddy, a cultural icon, a businessman larger than life. But there was also another side to him, a side that ran a criminal enterprise. During this trial, you are going to hear about 20 years of the defendant's crimes. But he didn't do it alone. He had an inner circle of bodyguards and high ranking employees who helped him commit crimes and helped him cover them up. Kidnapping, arson, drugs, sex crimes, bribery, and obstruction. These are just some of the crimes that the defendant and his inner circle committed again and again. You are going to hear about all of them during this trial. Let's start now with just one night. The defendant was on the hunt for his girlfriend, a woman named Cassie. For years, the defendant physically abused Cassie. He also sexually exploited her, forcing her to have sex with male escorts while he watched and recorded it. But that night, the defendant learned he had lost control of Cassie. He found out Cassie was seeing another man. Furious, he set out to find Cassie and that other man, but he couldn't do it by himself. So he took his gun and he took his bodyguard, one of the most loyal lieutenants, to wake up one of the defendant's employees in the middle of the night. The defendant yelled that he was going to kill the man Cassie was with. He demanded that his employee take him to that man's home. The defendant forced the employee out of her apartment and into an SUV. They drove to the home. The defendant and his bodyguard broke in, but no one was there. Oh, but the defendant didn't give up. He kept looking for Cassie. When he finally found her, he did what he had done countless times before. He beat her brutally, kicking her in the back and flinging her around like a rag doll. All of that violence wasn't enough, though. The defendant had to make sure he had control over Cassie once again, so he threatened her. The defendant told Cassie that if she defied him again, he would publicly release the videos of her having sex with male escorts that he kept as blackmail, souvenirs of the most humiliating nights of her life. This was just one night in the defendant's 2 decades of crime. In one night, he and his lieutenant kidnapped an employee, broke into a man's home, and the defendant beat and blackmailed his girlfriend. And as you will learn, this was just the tip of the iceberg. These are not the only crimes the defendant committed. That's not the only time he kidnapped someone. And Cassie is not the only woman he beat or sexually exploited. For 20 years, the defendant, with the help of his trusted inner circle, committed crime after crime. That is why we are here today. That is what this case is about. 20 years of crime is a lot to cover. So, first, I'm going to walk you through what the evidence in this case will show. Then, I will explain a little bit about the charges, and then I will tell you how the government will prove that the defendant is guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. So, what will that evidence show? You'll learn that the defendant was a musician who created an empire. He had a record label, Bad Boy Records, and other businesses that he ran or controlled. Those businesses made the defendant rich, and he used money and resources from those companies to build his reputation and to feed his every desire. To do that, he relied on an inner circle of people closest to him, like his bodyguards, chiefs of staff, and other high ranking employees who ran all aspects of his life. Together, the group worked to promote the defendant's power. They carefully cultivated and guarded his reputation, and they worked to get the defendant everything he wanted. He sometimes called himself the king, and he expected to be treated like one. He expected his inner circle to cater to his every desire, including his sexual desires. For years, the defendant used his inner circle and his company resources to sexually exploit multiple women, including women he forced and manipulated into having sex with male escorts, meaning men who the defendant paid to have sex with women while he watched. No matter what, the defendant and his inner circle made sure he got everything he wanted. Many times, that involved committing crimes together and then covering up those same crimes. Those crimes included violent acts, like when the defendant brought his bodyguard and his gun to kidnap the employee that I mentioned earlier. But you'll hear about other violence too, like the defendant's bodyguards kidnapped the same employee another time, forcing her to sit through days of lie detector tests, or when the defendant had a man's car set on fire, or when the defendant dangled a woman over a balcony. You'll see and hear evidence of all of this. The defendant had impossible demands. When his employees failed to meet those demands, the defendant threw things at them, threatened them, hit them, or pressured them to take drugs. He even sexually assaulted one of them. You'll also hear how the defendant used his employees to get and distribute drugs. They delivered those drugs whenever the defendant asked, including so he could give those same drugs to the women he was forcing to have sex with male escorts. He transported those women and those escorts across state lines and even out of the country for those sex acts. And he used his inner circle and the vast resources of his business empire to help to arrange those trips and make the women available to him. Let me be very clear on this next point. This case is not about a celebrity's private sexual preferences. This evidence will show that the sexual conduct at issue in this case was coercive and criminal because the defendant made women have sex when they did not want to, because he threatened them, he drugged them, he lied to them, and he even used violence to make them do it. A lot of this trial will focus on just two of those women, Cassie, who I talked about earlier, and Jane. Some of the details of what happened to Cassie and Jane may be hard to hear, but this is what the evidence will show happened. The defendant used lies, drugs, threats, and violence to force and coerce first Cassie and later Jane to have sex with him in front of male escorts. The defendant insisted that the sex occur in a very specific, highly orchestrated way. These sexual performances lasted multiple days and they involved multiple escorts. The defendant called these encounters by different names over the years. First, freak offs. Later, wild king nights or hotel nights. Week after week, the defendant directed freak offs in hotels across the country and sometimes out of the country. At times, the defendant had escorts and the women travel from out of state, so the defendant's staff sometimes organized flights, cars, and hotels. The defendant's businesses paid those expenses. The defendant had particular demands for freak offs. At his direction, the defendant's staff set up the room in advance with supplies like his preferred lighting, extra linen, and lubricant. His staff remained on call to refresh anything the defendant needed, like cash to pay the escorts or drugs for the women and the defendant. The hotel rooms were dark. The defendant instructed Cassie and Jane how to look, to dress in lingerie, wear tall platform high heels, and have manicured white nails. The defendant selected drugs for Cassie and Jane to take, usually MDMA, also known as Molly or ecstasy. Sometimes those drugs made Cassie and Jane sick, but they also made the women more uninhibited and sexually aroused. The defendant fed Cassie and Jane drugs throughout the freak off so they could stay awake and perform for him for hours and days at a time. Once an escort arrived, the defendant dictated every step of the sexual activity that followed the same pattern. And he expected the women to enjoy themselves, to appear to, while they did it. The defendant masturbated throughout the freak offs and often video recorded part of them. Now, I want to tell you more about Cassie and about Jane. Cassie was a 19-year-old model, an aspiring singer with a hit song when she met the defendant in 2006. The defendant was 17 years older than her and the head of a record label. Soon, Cassie was signed to a 10-album deal with that label. The defendant pursued Cassie, and within a year, they were dating. They stayed together on and off until about 2018. During that time, Cassie tried to work on her music and in modeling and acting, but the defendant made her turn down many opportunities. Instead, he paid for Cassie's cars, her apartments, and some of her day to day expenses. Although Cassie recorded music constantly, the defendant, the head of her record label, had the final say on the music that she released. It was never another album. The defendant started abusing Cassie early on. Initially, Cassie fought back, but time and again, the defendant hit Cassie in the head, threw her to the ground, and kicked her and dragged her by the hair. In 2009, the defendant threw Cassie to the floor of an SUV and stomped repeatedly on her face. To hide her injuries, the defendant forced Cassie to stay in the hotel for the next week. He refused to let her leave, and he had a staff check on her to make sure she stayed put. The defendant also introduced Cassie to freak-offs early on. Soon, the defendant made it Cassie's job to find and book escorts for freak-offs. Freak-offs that were happening as often as once a week for days at a time, meaning that for almost half of every week, Cassie was in a dark hotel room, high and awake for days, performing sex acts that she did not want to do on male escorts. Cassie would tell you how she felt, like she was choking when the defendant made an escort urinate in her mouth, and how she overdosed at a freak-off when she still had an open wound on her face from the defendant's most recent assault. The defendant's physical attacks on Cassie happened at freak-offs too. As you will see on video during this trial, the defendant hit and kicked Cassie in the hallway of an LA hotel, trying to drag her back to the room where they had been with an escort. We'll talk more about that video later. Cassie tried the first freak-off because she loved the defendant and wanted to make him happy. After that, she knew it was not something she wanted to do. But because of the defendant, it became almost everything she did. Because if Cassie didn't do what the defendant wanted, the consequences were severe. Physically, the defendant beat her viciously, exploding over even the tiniest slight and beating her to show who was in charge. He beat her when she didn't answer the phone when he called. He beat her when she left a freak off without his permission. He beat her when he thought she took too long in the bathroom. The defendant taught Cassie that defying him could and often would end in violence. And when she tried to run away, he always found her, often with the help of his inner circle. And Cassie's career and livelihood were also in the defendant's hand, something the defendant made clear to Cassie. He told her he could destroy her career by releasing the videos that he recorded of her performing sex acts on dozens and dozens of male escorts. So Cassie knew that failing to please the defendant, refusing his demands, it had the power to ruin her life. The defendant's control, the defendant's violence, and the defendant's threats. That is how the defendant ensured Cassie could not say no to him. So time and again, when the defendant suggested to Cassie that they have a freak off, she knew she had no choice but to agree and went to work setting one up. She texted the escorts, arranged for them to come to hotels, and put on performances the defendant wanted. Her livelihood and her safety depended on keeping him happy. Cassie's relationship with the defendant was complicated. You will hear during this trial that both Cassie and the defendant were unfaithful, jealous, and at times angry. But only one of them had power. Only one had control, and that was the defendant. And with that power and with that control, he made Cassie do his bidding in those dark hotel rooms. You'll learn, though, that Cassie was not the only woman that the defendant did this to. This was part of a pattern. Now I want to tell you about Jane. Jane was a single mom who started spending time with the defendant in 2020. The defendant pursued and romanced Jane, who fell in love with him quickly. Jane was not seeing other men, but the defendant was seeing other women at the time, so his relationship with Jane was not at all public. For the first few months, their sex life was just the two of them, and Jane was happy. That was until the defendant introduced Jane to freak-offs. One night, when they had already taken drugs and been having sex for hours, the defendant told Jane about freak-offs. Jane agreed to try one to make the defendant happy. To her surprise, the defendant said he would make it happen immediately, that very same night. He took her to a hotel where a room was already set up and an escort was on the way. Jane was nervous, and the defendant directed her step by step. Jane thought the Jane thought the first freak off was a one-time wild night. Oh, but Jane was wrong. The defendant continued asking Jane to have freak offs and promising that if she did, they would spend quality time together. They would go on dates together. They would go on trips. That was what Jane wanted more than anything, a real relationship. So she agreed. She helped plan freak offs and reach out to escorts. But even though the defendant promised her quality time and trips, he never delivered. Those were just the lies he told her to get more nights in dark hotel rooms with escorts. Jane will tell you about those nights in detail, how she wanted the escorts to wear condoms, but many times the defendant did not let them. And Jane will tell you how he had her take drugs to stay awake and aroused for days. Ja- Jane tried twice to make it through these nights without drugs. The first time, she broke down and had took ecstasy to finish performing for the defendant. The second time, Jane vomited after having sex with one escort. How did the defendant respond? He told her to hurry up and get back into the room where another escort was waiting. Early on, Jane told the defendant that she didn't like freak offs and she just wanted to be alone with him. She loved him desperately and wanted a real relationship with him. The defendant did not listen. Feeling stuck and sick of the strangers the defendant kept bringing into these hotel rooms, Jane tried to assert herself in small ways. She found two men who performed in pornography, and she invited them to join the freak offs. That way, Jane could at least choose the other man she was forced to be intimate with. Like he did with Cassie, the defendant eventually took steps to control Jane financially. The defendant wanted Jane available to meet with him at a moment's notice, and he discouraged her from working. Jane's income plummeted. The defendant gave Jane money and later started paying the rent for the house that she lived with her child. That way, when Jane resisted the freak offs and told him over and over that she wanted to stop, he had the power to coerce her back into the hotel rooms. And just as he had with Cassie, the defendant threatened Jane with the videos he recorded of her engaging in sex act with this escorts. But the lies and the drugs and the threats were not the end of it. Not even a year ago today, Jane had the worst day of her life. The defendant came to Jane's house for an at-home date night. She and the defendant argued about another woman that the defendant had been seeing. Jane was upset and jealous. She had now spent years in hotel rooms for forced sex while the defendant took his other girlfriends for dates and trips. Jane hit the defendant and threw things at him. The defendant became enraged, so Jane tried to get away from him and hide. She ran to her bedroom and locked the door. He kicked it open. She ran to her bathroom and locked the door. He kicked it open. She ran to her closet and locked the door. He kicked it open. She ran to the guest bedroom and locked the door. He kicked it open. She tried to run out the front door, but he grabbed her in a chokehold, lifted her off the ground by her neck, and kicked her to the ground. Later that night, they fought again. And just as he had with Cassie, the defendant viciously attacked Jane. He punched her in the face, kicked her while she was curled up in a ball on the ground, dragged her by her hair and her arm, and had slapped Jane's face so hard she fell over. When all of this was over, the defendant still did not let Jane be. Instead, he told Jane, "You're not going to fuck up my night." The defendant instructed her to put on an outfit and call up an escort for a freak off. He made Jane cover up her black eye and bruising, take an ecstasy pill, and perform for the defendant with that escort. Jane followed his instructions. Like with Cassie, the defendant's violence had gotten him what he wanted. The defendant's sexual violence did not stop at freak offs, though. Cassie will tell you about the time when the defendant forced himself on her,
having sex with her as she cried and repeatedly told him no. And Mia, an employee who the defendant worked to the bone for years, will tell you about the times that the defendant forced himself on her sexually, putting his hands up her dress, unzipping his pants, and forcing her to perform oral sex and sneaking into her bed to penetrate her against her will. As I said before, the defendant had the power and the control, endless resources, and the loyal inner circle who would stop at nothing to get what he wanted. Amidst all this violence, the defendant and his inner circle had to make sure that nothing put the defendant's public image and his power at risk. So, as tirelessly as the defendant's inner circle worked to meet the defendant's every need, they also worked to cover up his crimes. Remember the video at the LA hotel of the defendant attacking Cassie during a freak off? You will hear just how far the defendant, his bodyguards, and his chief of staff went to get what they thought was the only copy of that video. The defendant first tried to pay off a hotel security guard with a wad of cash in exchange for his silence. Then the defendant and his chief of staff reached out to a different hotel security guard to broker a deal. In exchange for the video from the hotel, the defendant gave the security guard a brown paper bag full of $100,000 in cash, while the defendant's bodyguard and his chief of staff stood by. This is far from the only time that the defendant's inner circle tried to close rank and do damage control. You'll hear how the inner circle covered up the defendant's brutal beatings by keeping Cassie in hiding for days. You'll hear about the inner circle contacting witnesses of the defendant's abuse to feed them lies, including even after he knew about the investigation in this case. Again and again, the defendant and his inner circle tried to keep the defendant's crimes out of public view to protect his reputation and to protect his power. That is what the evidence will show. In this case, will show. For all of this, the defendant is charged with multiple federal crimes. You'll hear a lot more on the charges at the end of the trial when the judge instructs you on the law and his instructions control. But for now, there are just a few points I want to highlight so you have context for what you'll hear during this case. First, the defendant is charged with racketeering conspiracy based on his agreement to commit crimes as part of an enterprise. I expect the judge will tell you that an enterprise is a group of people who work together for a common purpose of engaging in a course of conduct over a time. Here, you will learn that enterprise is the inner circle I talked about. The bodyguards and the high-ranking employees, like chief of staffs. Some of these people came and went over 20 years, but I expect the evidence will show that the defendant was a through line. He remained at the top, running that group, and he always had trusted bodyguards and advisors helping him. Together, they agreed to commit different crimes, including kidnapping and arson, distributing drugs to other people, exploiting employees for labor, and in Mia's case, sex, bribery and obstruction, sex trafficking, and transporting people for prostitution. That's all covered by the racketeering conspiracy charge. The defendant is also charged separately for sex trafficking Cassie and Jane through force, fraud, or coercion. Again, the judge's instructions control, but I expect you'll learn that fraud includes a lie about a material fact. Coercion includes threats, and force includes violence. The defendant is charged with using all three tactics to make Cassie and Jane participate in days-long, drug-fueled, recorded sexual encounters with male escorts against their will. Finally, he is charged with transporting Cassie, Jane, and male escorts across state lines for these sexual encounters. How will the government prove to you beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant is guilty of these crimes? You'll hear from witnesses, including Cassie and Jane, two of the defendant's victims. They will tell you how the defendant tried to control their lives, from their homes to their careers, and how the defendant used his control over them, his lies, his drugs, his threats, and his violence to force and coerce them into having sex with male escorts. Cassie and Jane will describe freak offs for you in painstaking detail. They will tell you some of the most personal and painful experiences of their lives. The days they spent awake in hotel rooms, high on drugs, dressed as characters to perform the defendant's fantasy, just as he directed them to. You'll also hear from some of the defendant's employees. You'll hear from Mia, who worked as the defendant's personal assistant for years, the employee he sexually assaulted. Mia is just Mia is just beginning to grapple with the times the defendant forced himself on her sexually. Mia will tell you how she could not talk about what happened to her until recently, how she wanted to take the secret of what the defendant did to her grave. You will hear from the employees who the defendant forced into that SUV with a gun, from one of the defendant's chiefs, and from other personal assistants. They will tell you they worked punishing hours and days for the defendant, at times without any sleep. They will tell you how the defendant ordered them to buy drugs for him, how they used all the resources at their disposal to make sure the defendant always had everything he desired, how they were expected to keep quiet about what they saw and what they heard in the defendant's homes. You will learn that some of these witnesses and victims, including Cassie, have already received financial settlements from the defendant or have filed lawsuits against the defendant. But these witnesses will tell you that they trade any money from the defendant for not having been abused. You will also hear from some of the escorts who participated in freak offs with Cassie and Jane. They will tell you how the defendant directed the sexual activity between the escorts and Cassie or Jane, down to the details of how they touch each other, the specific sex acts they performed, all while the defendant filmed it. You will even hear from an escort who saw the defendant assault Cassie and drag her by her hair during a freak off. In addition to these witnesses, you will see documents that prove the defendant's crimes. You'll see records from hotels, car services, and airlines showing the dates and location when the escorts and women traveled to meet the defendants for freak offs. You will see records of the physical damage the defendant and his freak offs caused the hotel rooms where he stayed. You will see dozens and dozens of text messages about freak offs, including messages from the defendant to his staff asking for more cash to pay escorts. Messages where the defendant tells Cassie what drugs to take and when before a freak off. And messages from Jane to the defendant telling him over and over again that she did not want to do freak offs. And you will see videos of some of these freak offs. The videos the defendant used to blackmail Cassie and to blackmail Jane. Those videos capture just small parts of these days-long performances. In them, you can hear the defendant providing direction to Cassie and Jane, and you will see Cassie and Jane do exactly what the defendant tells them to do. You will see them put on a performance high on ecstasy where they pretend to enjoy themselves because that's what the defendant said he wanted. You will see for yourselves the defendant's violence and its aftermath. You will see a video capturing the defendant brutally beating Cassie during a freak off at an LA hotel. You will see photos of Cassie and her injuries from the defendant's assaults. You will hear from witnesses who saw the defendant assault Cassie or saw injuries he inflicted on her. You will see photos of the damage the defendant did when he kicked in 4 doors at Jane's home. And you will see videos of Jane with bruising still on her face days after the defendant attacked her and forced her to do a freak off not even a year ago. You will see for yourself what the defendant had in his homes in March 2024 when they were searched: guns, the defendant's so-called med bag full of illegal drugs, and freak-off supplies like lubricant and platform high heels. Finally, you will see and hear evidence of how the defendant and his inner circle worked to keep his reputation and his power intact for all these years. You will see the agreement signed by the hotel security guard, barring him from speaking about the $100,000 that the defendant paid him for that hotel security video. You will hear the recordings of phone calls when the defendant called Jane after Cassie had filed a lawsuit. You will hear him. You will hear him try to manipulate Jane into saying she wanted to have freak offs. You will hear him interrupt Jane when she pushes back. You will hear the defendant's thinly veiled references to continuing to pay for Jane's home in exchange for her silence. And you will see the text messages the defendant sent his chief of staff right after talking to Jane to make sure that Jane's rent would still be paid on time. The evidence will come in piece by piece, and it won't always come in chronological order. But by the end of this trial, when you've seen and heard all of the evidence, you will see how it all fits together. You will see how it proves that the defendant led and controlled an enterprise that enabled him and others working for him to commit many crimes. How it proves that he forced and coerced Cassie and Jane into sex with male escorts, including by having them travel to other states and countries so those acts could happen. And you will see how all of these crimes and the empire the defendant control were designed to fulfill his sexual desires, to protect his representation, and to keep his power. At the end of this trial, we will have the opportunity to speak with you again. But between now and then, I will ask that you do three things. First, please first, please pay close attention to the evidence. Second, please follow the judge's instructions on the law. And third, please use and trust your common sense. If you do all that, you will reach the only verdict that is consistent with the law and the evidence in this case. That's that the defendant, Sean Combs, is guilty. The court.
I'm sorry, y'all. It's thundering and lightning is messing up. My apologies. Can you read it for me?
Yeah. All right. Who will be presenting opening statements?
I am, Your Honor.
And if you're in the gallery and you have a device, use this opportunity to silence it or it will be taken.
Good morning. Sean Combs is a complicated man, but this is not a complicated case. This case is about love, jealousy, infidelity, and money. This case is about voluntary adult choices made by capable adults and consensual relationships. This case is about those real life relationships, and the government is trying to turn those relationships into racketeering case, a prostitution case, and a ex trafficking case. It will not work. Let's start with the basics. The most important things in this courtroom are you and him. At a time when everything in government can feel so uncertain, one thing has remained the same in our justice system, and that is standing between all of us and a criminal conviction is a jury of our peers. That is you. You will hear the evidence. You will get the truth. You will see the witness and evaluate them one by one. And finally, the story about this case can finally come out. Why do I say that? I say that because this case is not about what you heard on the news, read in the news, or have seen on social media for the past year and a half. This case is not about what civil attorneys looking for a payday are trying to make my client out to be. There have been tremendous amounts of noise around this case for the past year, and it is time to cancel that noise and hear and see the evidence that will be presented in this courtroom. And it will be crystal clear. The story of Sean Combs is a fascinating one, but it is a human one. We are going to tell you his story over the next 2 months in this courtroom. And you will learn that he is a man who grew up here in New York City, in Harlem, who came from little, built, groundbreaking, lawful businesses. You will hear that he is a wealthy individual, but you know the evidence will show that nobody gave him this money. He worked for it and no one gave him a dime. It will show you that he made every single dollar, recreated a culture, and produced music that I believe you will hear will change the generation. And I believe that the evidence is going to show that this ingenuity is what drew people to Mr. Combs. Witness will share with you that Mr. Combs is a fascinating person and that people are drawn to him. Yes, he is famous. Yes, he is wealthy. And that's certainly part of it. But he was charismatic and magnetic and a larger life figure. If you had interest in climbing the social ladder at time and being involved in the music industry, the apparel industry, spirits industry, attending his legendary parties, you wanted to be around Sean Combs. You also wanted to be around him because of the benefits that came along with being with him. As you listen to the evidence in this case, try to remember why that matters. Try to remember why people stayed around him and why it matters. I expect it will matter to you as a jury because he gave people opportunities and he gave people chances to work at his companies. They believe he had a vision that few others had, and for the most part, I believe the evidence will show you that they loved him. I don't think that the witness will tell you they always liked what he did or how he behaved, but the real time text messages that you will review in this case show that the people really loved him. And they believe that by being with Sean Combs, they were part of something special. So by now, you've heard the government say a lot of things about my client. It is time for me to introduce you to him. His name is Sean Combs. You may have heard him by Puff Daddy, P Diddy, Puffy, Diddy, but standing in this courtroom at 55 years old, in the same place he was born and raised, he's going by the same name he was born with, Sean Combs. My name is Teeny Garagos, and I am one of the attorneys honored to represent him. The government started their opening statement by telling you this is about a 20-year racketeering influence corrupt organization at enterprise that he committed with his apparent trusted inner circle. The only people in this courtroom who will tell you that they participated in, knew about, or came to an agreement to participate in a racketeering enterprise are the prosecutors. Not one witness will get into this courtroom and will take that witness stand and tell you that they were part of any racketeering influence corrupt organization at Enterprise. And the reason is simple. There was not one. You heard what the government tried to say the Enterprise is. that he used his lawful businesses to feed his entire every desire, including sexual ones. This case is about Sean Combs' private personal sex life, which has nothing to do with his lawful businesses. The government has no place here this man's private bedrooms. The government can say over and over again that this is not about private sex life, but the evidence will show you that it is. The people who will come into this courtroom and testify are the people who will know about racketeering enterprise, and those people will all say they knew nothing about any enterprise. That is because these hardworking individuals were either doing their jobs as personal assistants or as top executives running his successful businesses. These individuals educated at places from Harvard and Howard University. The prosecution will bring in those same employees and others in this courtroom and have them to testify that Sean Combs has a temper. And when he drink or when he did the wrong drugs, he would get violent. My client is not proud of that, but it is one of the many things we are going to own and fully admit right up front at this trial. Sean Combs has a bad temper. He sometimes gets angry or so jealous that he is out of control. You will see evidence that you will hear some testimony that does not portray my client in good light. You will hear some text messages, some voice notes, and some witnesses' testimony that may make you think, I don't think this guy is a great guy. I don't like how he just lied to his girlfriends. I don't like the things he just said in that text message. I want to tell you now, there may be one point, there may be multiple points at this trial where you think, I think he's a jerk and I think he's kind of mean. But he's not charged with being mean. He's not charged with being a jerk. He's charged with running a racketeering enterprise. And though there was violence that you are going to hear about, you already have that violence is not part of any RICO. That violence is not connected to ex trafficking and that violence is not prostitution. There was a name in criminal law for the violence that we will hear about and we will see at this trial. It is called domestic violence. It is called assault. Domestic violence is a very serious matter. I want to say that now. It is a bad, illegal problem, and it is something that the law addresses. We take full responsibility that there was a domestic violence in this case. Domestic violence is not ex trafficking. I want to say it again. Domestic violence is not ex trafficking. Had he been charged with domestic violence, he had been charged with assault. We would not be here right now. We would not be sitting through an 8-week trial. However, he has been charged with different crimes: ex trafficking, prostitution, and racketeering. These are federal crimes with their different statutes. They charge different elements, and he is simply not guilty of those crimes. One of the central themes of my statement to you will be personal accountability and personal responsibility. As the trial goes on, we will see that with each witness. We are going to take that on ourselves. We will not shy away from the things Mr. Combs did, but we will not deny his personal responsibility or own the things he did not do. We are telling you right now that hold on. We are telling you right now that this is a physical, that he is a drug user, and I'm telling you he had a bit of different sex life. For example, if you have heard, if you have not heard any evidence in this case, but the prosecutors already told you about lubricant, and you may know one of his love of baby oil. Is that a federal crime? No. You will hear that he got IVs after ingesting drugs. Is that a federal crime? No. He will be responsible. He will be accountable for the things that he did. But we will fight for his freedom throughout the next 8 weeks for what he did not do. And he cannot be the only person in this case who accepts personal responsibility and accountability for his actions. The alleged victims who would testify in this area are capable of strong adult women. They were all getting something each of them wanted from him and from being in a romantic relationship with him. And these adults, capable, strong women, will have to take on the same level of personal responsibility for their lives that he is going to take on for his. When any person in life makes adult choice, that is a free choice. A free choice has pros. It has cons. You may think there are better choices. You may think that there are worse choices. But that does not eliminate personal responsibility behind those choices. And each of the women you will hear from, they all had the personal responsibility and the freedom to make choices they made. You will hear from these women. You will see these women. You will meet them. They will sit in the witness chair for a few feet away, and you will evaluate them for yourselves. You will see that they are capable. You will see that they are strong, and you will see that they made free choices every single day for years. As you are listening to the evidence and you listen to them testify, I want you to ask yourselves, what are all of the ways that this individual had ability to make that choice? Ask yourself, what are they getting from being with Sean Combs? They are not with him because they stuck or because they are without a choice. The government will try to show you that Sean Combs is the only one getting something from each of the alleged victims who testify in this case. But with each of these individuals, ask yourselves, what is this person getting? They are with him or they are working with him because they are getting something they want from being with him. And it usually is. But with each person, they are all getting something. So as you listen to the evidence, watch closely to the role that jealousy plays in this case. We have talked to you, both of us already, about jealousy and how it is pervasive and present in every single relationship. But I want to also let you know it drives a lot of the choices that the alleged victims made here. Combs is one of the most men that I'll submit to you. We all know. The evidence is going to show that he is somebody who never married, but he needed to always have a woman around him. He he is a many woman man. He has 7 children by 4 different women. And he is the kind of guy who is always in a relationship. In fact, he was always in multiple relationships. But critically, he was not always honest about the fact. And you will find that even when women knew he was in multiple relationships, and this drive a primal jealous in people, it would drive a lot of the choices you are going to see in this case. You are also going to see that Sean Combs is extremely jealous. You might think that it's hypocritical. You might not like it, but you are going to see that he is also extremely jealous. So as you listen to the evidence and you're evaluating this testimony, ask yourself, what is causing that fight? The answer is, without exception, jealousy or drugs. The hitting, the things we are going to take responsibility for, it is typically because of jealousy or drug use. The roles of jealousy here is critical and is pervasive. The evidence will show you that over the course of the 20 years we will examine in this courtroom, we'll see the same women over and over. They remain in multi-year relationship with him, and I believe that you'll pretty much know about every relationship he had over the past 20 years. Again, that's whether this is an employee or a girlfriend. You will pretty much know about every girlfriend he has had. You will see that these women are strong, capable, and they were in love with him. You will see that the breaches of trust, infidelity, and jealousy are what drove domestic violence you would hear about. You would see that alcohol and drugs played a major role in his temper. The evidence is going to show you a very flawed individual, but it will not show you a racketeer or sex trafficker or somebody transporting for prostitution. So as we've said, you are going to hear from two women, Cassie and Jane. The case is in large part about his sexual relationship with these two women. And you're going to hear that they went to a private hotel room to engage in what I expect some witness at this case to call swingers lifestyle, which is essential, just a fancier terminology for threesomes by women or by adults. Sometimes Combs partook in the sex with his girlfriend and a male escort. And other times he watched while the male escort was having sex with his girlfriend. You heard the government call them freak offs. I expect you will hear that. I expect you will also hear them call parties and entertainment. You will hear from both Cassie and Jane about these nights. They will testify about their relationships, and you will hear things that should never be heard in a federal courtroom. I think you've heard that already. You've heard things that make you uncomfortable at first. That he liked to watch this. You might hear about his kinky sex or his preferences for sex that may make you uncomfortable and may not be what you like to do in the bedroom. But you are not here to judge him for his sexual preferences. You are not here to judge him for all purposes. You are here to evaluate whether the government can prove beyond a reasonable doubt what they actually charged him with. They cannot. You've also heard that in his relationship with both Cassie and Jane, he bought them things. Yes, like every relationship, they got things from their boyfriend. Here, a wealthy rapper paid for their housing, he paid for Cassie's car, and he gave them money. These are nice houses that he paid for. It was a nice car that Cassie drove, and they were nice vacations on private planes because he is a wealthy individual. These were vacations that they took together as couples. And as I've said, like every relationship, there were jealousy and there were flaws. But as you evaluate the evidence in this case, remember that he is not charged with being a flawed individual or having a flawed relationship. They did not stay with him over and over again because of force, fraud, or coercion. The evidence in this case will show you that over and over again, day after day, these women fought to be in a relationship, fought to do what they wanted to do in consensual adult relationship. The case started with Cassie, so I think it's best for me to start there. I expect you will hear from her this week. She would sit in the witness box and she would tell you about her 11-year relationship with Sean Combs. You heard they met when she was an up and coming artist. What you didn't hear is that she had a boyfriend at the time, and he was in a very public relationship with the mother of four of his children named Kim Porter. After the two fell in love and started dating, she broke up with her producer boyfriend. But Combs, for his part, did not break up with Kim. He remained in a public relationship with her, and that is something that caused extreme jealousy with Cassie. He continued that relationship with Kim Porter until her tragic, untimely death from pneumonia in 2018. This is important because as you look at the evidence and as you evaluate Cassie and Combs' relationship, you will see that their fights, their cheating, their jealousy is typical surrounded by cheating or is surrounded hers. This is something that plagued their relationship until the very last day. The evidence will show you that he was extremely jealous of Cassie's actual or perceived infidelities, and she was uncontrollably jealous of his. This led to a toxic relationship because two people that I expect the evidence will show deeply deeply loved for each other. Perhaps they did not always show love to one another the way you will with your partner, but they were in a relationship and she was not being trafficked. You will see that over and over again in this decade long relationship, these two fought about his inability to remain faithful. I expect Cassie to tell you about the jealousy of Kim Porter and another girlfriend that he started dating in 2014 named Gina. This jealousy is something that plagued their relationship. Even the day of the intercontinental video in the elevator bank that much of you told us during jury selection that you saw, that day, unfortunately, jealousy was full display. And in combination with that bad drug that I expect Cassie to testify that Combs took, it led to domestic violence in the elevator bank. This assault happened almost 10 years ago on the March 5th of 2016. I expect that we all going to see in this video many, many times throughout this trial. You are going to see it later today, and I expect you to see it many more times throughout this week. You're going to see it a lot, but I want to start by saying two things. First, what Combs did to Cassie on the videotape is indefensible. It's horrible. It's dehumanizing. It's violent. It's virtually every bad word you can think of. And while it is dehumanizing and violent and terrible, the second most important thing is that it is not evidence of sex trafficking. It is evidence of domestic violence. You will see that it is also evidence of the central theme in this case, which is jealousy. That's what this videotape shows you. As you watch it later today and as you watch it throughout this week, I want you to look for two things. The first part of Cassie walking out of the hotel room, walking down the hallway, she is carrying two bags, and you will see that she makes it to the elevators. And then Combs comes down wearing only a towel. He pulls Cassie by the hoodie, and she falls to the floor. He kicks her in her backside, and he stumps her on the back of her leg, and he starts to drag her by her hoodie back to the hotel room. You would see him walk away momentarily with her bags, and you would see this. Then he comes back around and walks towards her, and she is kind of in the left part of the screen. When he comes towards her, he has nothing in his hand. And when he walks away from her, you will see an illuminated phone in his hand. He wanted this phone and he got it. Please understand that this video is overwhelming evidence of domestic violence, but it's overwhelming evidence that this domestic violence is over a phone and not because of sex trafficking. What causes a fight about this phone? We can all use our life experiences to show us that phones keep the secrets of infidelity. And you will hear that there was another fight even later that year again about a phone. I'm not justifying the assault, not by a long shot, but I'm putting it in proper context. Because you will see that as soon as he gets the phone, he sits down. He is visibly disgusted. He broke a vase and he threw flowers and stayed away. The video has a second part. Cassie calls security from the hotel phone. The security officer comes to the floor, and I expect you will hear from him later today. Combs is sitting in a chair slumped over. He is holding his head in his hands, and the security officer tells him to leave the public area of the hotel where they were making a commotion. You will see Cassie turn to Combs and gesture to her. And pay attention to the words that I think you would see her say to him, which is, get back to the room. Two parts. Both of them important, and both of them important to show that Combs assaulted Cassie. But you can't stop there because he is not charged with assault. It is because of sex trafficking, as the government is going to argue to you, or is it because of something else? I expect the evidence, even just this week, will show you that the fight was over a phone. These two stayed together 2 more years after this incident. And to understand how and to understand why is to understand how this relationship ended. You will hear, even in 2018, these two were fighting to stay together. But the evidence will show you that in the summer of that year of 2018, she woke up to a gossip site that showed a photo of Combs and Gina, the same woman who had started having an affair in 2014, or a relationship with, I should say, walking out of the Standard Hotel together. Cassie could not come back from it. She could not give him another chance. And instead, she made the choice, as she often did, when he was caught in public with Gina, to break up with him and date another man. For Cassie, she made a choice every single day for years. A choice to stay with him, a choice to fight for him. Because for 11 years, that was a better choice. That was her preferred choice. And so she made the choice to stay with him until one day she decided she wanted to break up with him because that was her preferred choice. So it's important for you to remember as you evaluate the evidence, because she was not coerced to continue or engage in the sex life with Sean Combs. When she made a decision to leave, there were no repercussions, and the government hinted. She made the choice to leave. She communicated it to him, and she ran into the arms of another man, a physical trainer who Combs had hired to train her. So I will ask you, ladies and gentlemen, pay close attention to the messages, the real-time communication between these individuals, and the messages surrounding their breakup. Does Combs release the videotapes the government was just talking about? No, he doesn't. You will hear that the government raided two of his homes. You have already heard that over a year ago. They seized countless electronic devices. The only freak out videos you would see or hear about at this trial came from her devices that she kept for 5 years. So when the government talks about power and control, who had the power? Who had the control? The government did not find any freak off videos with Cassie on those devices. And so going back during the time of Cassie and Combs' breakup, Cassie is already dating her now husband. She is with him for months as she is breaking up with Combs, all while telling Combs she still loves him. And then in November of 2018, Kim Porter tragically passed away from pneumonia. Knowing that Combs would be distraught and wanting to be there for him, she did everything she could to be there. She came to the memorial service at his home. She flew to Kim's home state of Georgia to be at the funeral. Don't lose the sight of the fact that amidst the breakup, all the way at the end of 2018, she flew to a funeral service to be there for him and support him and his family during the trying time of their life. And at the service at their home, Combs, to a group of loved ones, former employees, and others, and to many on social media who were paying respect, said, and I quote, "Kim was my soulmate. In Cassie's presence for everybody to hear, he said, she was my soulmate." The end of relationship between Cassie and Combs is important, and I want you to focus on evidence of how and why it ended. When Combs publicly said Kim Porter was his soulmate, to all the people around him who were there for the first time, maybe ever, Cassie realized all the things she would not be. I expect many witnesses at this trial tell you she wanted to be Combs' wife. I expect even she may tell you that. That is what she spent 11 years trying to get. And in one day, it became clear to Cassie she was never going to be that. And if she was never going to be Combs' wife, if she was never going to be the love of his life, then she would leave. And that is what she did on her terms, her choice, for reasons that for her were not the right reasons. This is where bringing personal experience to this jury matters. This is something we all have been through. That one life event you can point to where you can say, That is when I know it was over. Because that is what this was for. Because this was a relationship, although toxic at times, like every other relationship, it was not based on coercion. It was not based on force. At a certain point, you know you're not going to get what you need from that other person, and you leave. After Kim's funeral, they never saw each other again. The very first time that this former couple would see each other after 6.5 years of a breakup is in this courtroom later today or tomorrow. We are all going to witness their closure, and that is because she moved on with her life and he moved on with his life. You will see that she married the trainer. She had 2 children with him, and she's pregnant with her third. And Combs also moved on with his life. As you listen to her testimony, as you read her messages closely, evaluate what Combs' intent was at the time. Evaluate what he understood about what she wanted during those 11 years that they spent together. What he understood, I expect the message to show you what that was. She was willing to participate in their sex life. That was a voluntary adult choice by 2 capable adults. What Cassie may testify to this week, 6 years after a breakup, is not a match for the real time evidence that you would have. The real time text message I urge you to read. Evaluate his intent, which is the only thing that matters here. The government also talked to you a lot about Jane. She is the other woman that the government alleged Combs sex trafficked. She was his girlfriend of 3 years, and she comes into his life several years after Cassie's breakup. He, I think you will find in the evidence, is a little bit different in 2020 and 2021 than he was when he was dating Cassie. And I think the most important reason you would see is that he was more upfront about his dating life. Rather than saying that he was only dating one person, he was very upfront with Jane. I expect her to tell you that he was dating multiple different women. However, as I started my open statement, this this did not stop the jealousy. Jane's relationship with Combs was plagued by jealousy. Their relationship was not the 11-year public romance that Combs and Cassie had. The problem is that Jane wished that it was. The government told you that their relationship was not public. You are going to hear from Jane why that was. There were many different reasons why that was. And so, after a period of time, their relationship becomes primarily sexual. Jane is also older than Cassie was when she started dating him. And she was living in her own life in a different state, raising her child. She is capable, strong, adult woman. And you are going to hear, as I expect you've already heard, that pretty soon after her relationship with Combs started, he brought up the idea of whether she would want to have sex with other men. Again, like a consensual threesome, and Combs would watch. She agreed, and they went to a private hotel room away from his employees, away from family. And I expect that she would testify that she enjoyed that night. She laid down on the couch after and said to herself, like, wow, I can't believe I just did that. And you will see that Combs really began to love these hotel nights with her. And I expect that she would testify that she began to do everything possible to make nights incredible for Combs. That includes finding the best male entertainment to join them, to wear the outfit he will find the sexiest, and saying all the things during the nights that would incite him. I expect she would testify. She did not, well, I expect she would testify she did this because she loved him. She was desperate to spend time with him, to be with him, to ultimately give him something none of the other girlfriends that was dating at the time were giving him. She would tell you that she tried many times to change the tenor of the relationship from one of the purely sexual natures to something maybe deeper or more meaningful. I am not sure exactly how she would put that to you, but she would testify that it always comes back to what they would call parties, which were these nights in hotel rooms. And the evidence would show you that she did it over and over again for 3 years because she made that choice. And this became their time together. This became their sex life. And I expect she would testify that she realized that if she didn't have these hotel nights with Combs, they may not get their alone time together, which is the time she so deeply craved. I expect she would tell you that she kept coming back over and over again because she did it for the affection. She did it for the love, for the cuddle, and because she knew it would make him happy. And she wanted more than anything to make him happy. She was unable to resist him emotionally, and her desire to be with him outweighed all of the other considerations of hers. The government told you about a phone call they had in November 2023. I expect the evidence will show you that even after this phone call, she continued. She flew out to see him many more times and continued willingly engaging in these nights. The evidence is going to show you a toxic, dysfunctional relationship because these two individuals, and you may think to yourself, wow, he is really a bad boyfriend. But the evidence is going to show you that she is a capable, strong woman who willingly engaged in their sex life so they could spend time together. That is simply not sex trafficking. I expect her to testify that she was a willing participant, and being a willing participant in your own sex life is not sex trafficking. I expect her to also testify that there were nights she engaged in sex because she hoped she could turn their relationship from one of a more sexual relationship into something more. And she would testify that if she walked away, she would have lost him. That is not something she was willing to do. And as I said, you would see her jealousy on full display at this trial. You would see that she was willing to engage in these nights with Combs. And then she would be on social media after. And she would see he was with another one of his girlfriends, either out to dinner or traveling. And she would send messages with regret afterwards. These are born out of jealousy, which was the root of their troubles, and regret does not mean that she was coerced. Her jealousy drove her to make the moves she made. As I said, every single witness in this case had free choice to make the choices they made. The jealousy of the women in Combs' life was one of hers. Seeing the other women that he would be on social media posts with otherwise drove her to try to be in first place and made her more desirous of their time together. This was the way to get there, and the evidence would show you that that is simply not a crime. The government also told you about a night a year ago where Jane hit Combs. Once again, as I said, this was a night born out of jealousy. You will hear, as you've already heard, that he also hit her back. But what you didn't hear was the start of the fight. She was overcome by jealousy that night. She slammed his head down on the kitchen counter. This is how the fight started. I do not want to justify this night. I do want to I do not want to justify the assault, but I simply am here to tell you that the evidence will show you that it starts because she slammed his head on the kitchen counter. And you are also going to hear that less than a month or approximately a month after this assault, an incident of domestic violence at her home, she flew to Combs' home in Miami. She called an escort and had what I expect her to say was one of the best hotel nights she had with one of their regular escorts. Now, during the testimony of both Cassie and Jane, I expect the government is going to put in a bunch of videotapes of the so-called freak-offs or hotel nights or wild king nights, however you like to call them, into evidence. These videotapes depict what we've been telling you about. Sean Combs, one of his girlfriends, and a man. These videos will believe are powerful evidence that the sexual conduct in this case was consensual and not based on coercion. But I want to say one thing to you now. Some of you may find them hard to watch, not only because they are violent, not because they are non consensual, but because they were never meant to be seen by people outside of that room. They are, in one word, intimate, and they were always meant to remain that way. The reason these videos will be seen by you is because the government has chosen to take possession of these videos and to put them into evidence into a federal courtroom. Playing these videos will feel invasive, but the government has charged him with sex trafficking. And the evidence of the alleged sex trafficking is on these tapes. This is why you will have to see them. You may hear about other women. The government told you about someone named Mia, for example. I urge you to pay attention to these other women' real time communications with Combs. Ask yourself, why are you making this allegation now? What is your motive? You will conclude, like you will with every single other witness in this case, that everybody who testifies has a motive. With Mia, for example, I ask you to evaluate her motive when you listen to her testimony. What are the reasons she is saying what she might be saying now? What she never said before, and certainly never said when she first started cooperating with the government. This is someone you should evaluate her messages carefully. One of unbelievable love for Combs throughout her employment. You are going to hear from several other past employees of his. They will try to paint a picture for you of a hostile workplace. And as I've said with nearly every single witness in this case, when these people testify, ask yourself, why did anybody, if they were so scared and if this was so hostile, ever call the police? Why not? I expect that the evidence will show you that the testimony against him, their former boss, for many, not all, is vindictive or they are being subpoenaed to give it. Like every other witness, ask yourself, what is the something? What is the reason that they stayed? You will find with every single person they had a something. So when you hear from witness who testify here, who would tell you they were victimized, and ask yourself, what is their motive? For many of them, the answer is simple: money. This criminal case started because of Cassie, not because she went to law enforcement with her allegations, but because she filed a public lawsuit against Combs in November of 2023. At this time, when she was having financial trouble and living with her parents' modest home in Connecticut with her family, rather than go to the law enforcement about what had alleged happened to her, she went to a civil lawyer who is here today. I expect that this trial, from nearly every witness that you hear from, they would tell you that instead of going to law enforcement after either their employment ended for the alleged victims, they went to a civil lawyer for a money grab. They would claim that they were so afraid of this man that they could of course not go to the police because he was so powerful. But they were not so afraid that they could not go to civil lawyers to make money demands against him. Demands for unbelievable amounts of money, more than any of us have ever made. Cassie, for example, would tell you that she first made a demand on Combs for $30 million. Another witness would tell you that in a breach of contract case, she made a demand for $22 million. And as you listen to these witnesses, and there will be many, as the prosecutor told you, who made civil demands against him, I want you to ask yourself, how many millions of reasons does this witness swearing to tell the truth and nothing but the truth have to lie? How many hundreds of thousands of reasons does the witness swearing to tell the truth and nothing but the truth have to lie? Will you really believe that these people who have demanded an unimaginable money of amount of money from Combs would have traded all of that to have been abused. Because that is the case, I submit that you would consider, why did they never go to law enforcement? So, in closing, the evidence will be framed to prove from the government. They will attempt to prove racketeering influence and corruption organization act charge, two sex trafficking charges, and two prosecution counts. The evidence you will hear at this trial will not make out any of them. The conspiracy charge is that Combs allegedly committed two counts of acts of kidnapping, one count of arson, a bribery and obstruction of justice, forced labor, and drug trafficking. I am going to take these briefly in turn, and then I'm going to ask you to evaluate the evidence by the witness who would testify about these acts. First, he did not commit any of these crimes. In terms of the alleged bribery and obstruction of justice, this relates to the Intercontinental Hotel incident that we've already talked about this morning. You will hear, as you already did, that he paid money to a security guard at the Intercontinental so the footage would go away. This was solely related to preventing bad publicity for both Combs and Cassie, and he had nothing to do with obstruction or obstructing a law enforcement investigation. No law enforcement investigation existed, period. That is a requirement. So the evidence will show you he simply did not commit those acts. As to kidnappings and the arson, I submit that you are not going to find there were any kidnappings, and he was simply not involved in the alleged arson. The government told you that kidnappings relate to one employee, who I am telling you the evidence will show worked for Combs. The evidence will show worked for Combs for almost a decade. As you listen to her testimony and evaluate, was this person actually kidnapped? I expect the evidence is going to show you that even after criminal investigation into Combs started, she asked to work for him again 12 years after her employment ended. 12 years after she claimed she had been kidnapped the last time. Now, more than a decade after these kidnapping acts. So, the evidence is going to show you that he simply did not commit them. As to drug trafficking, I submit the evidence is going to show you that the drugs are personal use drugs for him and at times the women he was with. And those drugs have nothing to do with enterprise. And to the forced labor, you will see that Combs worked hard. His employees worked hard, but they were there to do something great and novel for his lawful businesses. It was not forced. Being there was an adult free choice like everything else in this case. Second, the RICO conspiracy requires a group effort, even if the group is two people. And there will be no evidence of that. So as you listen to the evidence, ask yourself, who is Combs actually conspiring with to violate the Racketeer Influence Corrupt Organization Act? The answer will be no one. Finally, the last of the charges I will talk to you about are the two counts that charge him with causing interstate travel for the purpose of prostitution. For him to be guilty, I expect the judge would tell you that he had to intentionally engage in what he knows to be prostitution. What the evidence is going to be is that he was paying different men for their time and their experience. Think about pornography industry, for example. Actors in pornographic movies are paid for their time, and generally they have sex. Otherwise, it wouldn't be pornography. You will hear about many companies. I expect you hear from one later today called Hunkomania, a company called Cowboys for Angels that advertise online across the country where you can pay money for time and experience. These escort companies are common and they do not advertise themselves as money for sex. They advertise themselves as money for time and money for experience. And that is what Sean Combs was doing. He was paying money for that experience. So, in closing, I ask you once again to listen carefully to all the evidence. You are not here to judge or impose your moral beliefs on this man. You are here as a jury of his peers to determine whether the government can meet its burden of proving beyond a reasonable doubt that he committed these crimes. When you hear the evidence, when you go back into the jury room and evaluate the evidence in light of the crime that are actually charged here, you will return the only verdict that the evidence demands, that he is not guilty of these crimes. Court.
All right. At this time, I think it's appropriate for us to take a break for lunch. We are going to take a little bit longer of a break today because I think that some of the folks in the office and the marshal service have things to discuss with our jurors. It's now 12:13. We will come back at 1:15 and we will make some adjustments to the courtroom. So, just a reminder, during lunch, do not have any discussions with each other about this case. Don't look up anything about this case. Do not have any discussions with anyone about this case. And no one here in the courtroom or outside of it is to have any discussions with the jurors whatsoever. With that, all rise for the jury.
Please be seated. Do either of the parties have anything to raise before we adjourn for lunch?
Not from us, Your Honor.
Mr. Steele? Good afternoon, Your Honor. I just want to call the court's attention. The prosecutor for the first witness is going to attempt to introduce, I believe, she's very professional, told me two exhibits. The government exhibit 7R141 as well as government exhibit 7R148. I would have an objection to both. I just want to give you a heads up in case you wanted to discuss it at all. I didn't want to slow down the case.
Well, in the future, let's try to have these things raised the day before. Because in this kind of situation, what I would have done is had the parties address these issues at the beginning of the day. That's just for the next time. But for now, what are these exhibits and what is the objection? Your Honor, I can take it from here. We apologize for not raising this until today. The government has been confirmed with defense about business record stipulations, and the government had thought that we reached an agreement over the weekend. The defense informed us that they would not be stipulating to the admissibility of those particular records. So, at issue here for the first witness that the government intends to call, that's one of the security guards at the Intercontinental Hotel in 2016. The two exhibits are two separate incident reports. I have paper copies of those exhibits if Your Honor would like to see them. Essentially, the first exhibit is an incident report that the security guard drafted and sent, per hotel policy and practice, approximately 3 hours after the incident. The report included the guard's, a recounting of his personal observations and interactions with the defendant and victim one. This particular report included photos that were taken of the hotel lobby that showed the broken base and the damage caused to the lobby. This first report was drafted and sent by the guard before he had reviewed the video and surveillance. So the second incident report that the government intends to offer is exactly the same as the first, but includes an ad, ad, addendum that describes the video surveillance that he reviewed after the incident. So this guard will testify that drafting and sending incident reports like these were part of his responsibilities as a security officer at the Intercontinental Hotel, and that he drafted sent incident reports like these in the normal course of his duties. As I mentioned, both incident reports were sent immediately after the incident in question. So the government obtained these incident reports along with other documents from the parent corporation of the hotel, along with the business record certification also produced by the parent corporation. And under these circumstances, the government position is that the incident reports are admissible under the business record exception to hearsay. That's 8036. And I'm happy to get further into why the government submits that the conditions laid out in 8036 are met here. Well, I mean, you're going to have the witness prove it up, right? Of course, the witness will lay the foundation for entry of these documents as business records.
Right. You don't have the individual who executed the stipulation. You're not going to rely on that.
That's right.
You're relying on what you get from the parent corporation. You have the.
Who drafted and sent the documents? Exactly.
So, Mr. Steele, what's the nature of the objection? Your Honor, I'm objecting is threefold. The objection is threefold. First of all, on Exhibit 7R 148, Your Honor, there is an addendum, as the prosecutor just told you. And this is the stipulation or the speculation of their witness. He's watching, he's a security guard. He comes up to the sixth floor of the hotel. He interacts with Cassie and Mr. Combs and then goes back down eventually to his office as he watched a video recording that he had not seen before. Then he details his opinions about the recording that he does not have personal knowledge of, including that Mr. Combs' attempt to take Cassie's phones away. I don't believe that he would know whose phone that is from watching that video. No personal knowledge. In addition to that, Your Honor, he has impressions in the body of both. He has impressions in the body of both of the exhibits 141 and 148, such as in the second paragraph that Mr. Combs began to offer me a bribe. That's a quote, Your Honor. That is his mental impressions. I just don't want the document to go in. I understand he's a witness. We'll cross-examine him. I'm not objecting to that. I'm objecting to the document going into the evidence. In addition to that, Your Honor, he talks about in the third full paragraph that he did not want Mr. Combs to see Cassie. That is when Cassie is outside on the street level waiting for her car. He talks about that. He talks about what he himself did not want, meaning that Mr. Combs was going to come back down off the sixth floor, which did not happen. And he talks about a coworker, Addie, Adey, who went up to room 602 with Mr. Addy, and that Mr. Combs, he speculates, is about to start yelling. My point is, Your Honor, that I believe that all of that is speculation. It should not go in other it should not go in on either document. He also writes in the third paragraph that Mr. Combs touches Miss 80 again in the Los Angeles Police Department would escort Mr. Combs from the hotel property. There is no police there. There is no police call. There is no discussion of the police. So I don't believe that under 8036E that this document is trustworthy. It is not all based on personal knowledge. Under 403, there are parts of it that are prejudicial, and I don't believe it should come in either document.
All right. I think you got I think you've got to you anticipated my question. So your objection comes under 8036E and 403, right?
Fair.
Okay, I understand. So Miss Slavic, do you have the paper copies? Could you hand them up?
I do, Your Honor.
So we'll pick this up after the lunch break. Anything further, Mr. Steele?
No, sir.
All right. We are adjourned. We will come back at 1:15.
Miss Sylvia.
Woo! Congratulations! We did it. Can y'all hear me?
That's just the morning session.
Can y'all hear me?
Exactly.
Yes. It's a lot more
All
that I
right.
don't think we're gonna get through tonight.
Mm-mm.
No. We're done for the night because I gotta go to bed. I gotta get up in the morning. Can y'all hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, I don't know why it seems like my face is not moving. So all right, good people. I have to go to bed because I got court in the morning. I wish we could continue it right now, but no, we can't do that. Thank you, ladies, for helping me out because I don't know what's happening. We started thundering and lightning, and my thing was not working.
No problem.
I would like to ask anybody in the chat to hit up Miss Sylvia. If you would like to help us read, it will be so much,
Yeah, I got
so much
a couple of
appreciated.
people email me. They emailed me. So we will continue part 145 tomorrow. Good night, everybody. Thank you, Mimi. Thank you, Tiara. You guys rock. I thank you. I appreciate you guys for all that you do.
You're
Good
welcome. Good
night.
Yes,
night.
ma'am.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Thank you for watching the infamous Sylvia channel, where laughter and fun make up our panel. Together we build this digital spree. We appreciate you and our growing family. With mods by our side and chat flowing free in this online space. It's just you and me. We laugh until tears roll down like the rain. In this virtual world, you ease all my pains. We're a family, not just a show. Every click and comment makes us grow. Mods and chat, keeping the vibe so right. Together we shine like stars in the night. We cherish the moments, the highs and lows, from the latest gossip to stories untold. You're more than a viewer, you're part of the crew in this space of ours. It's all because of you. This digital world where emotion is shared, every post and reaction showing we care. The love is real in this virtual domain. With every sign and joys we'll both gain. We're a family, not just a show. Every click and comment makes us grow. Mods and chat, keeping the vibe so right. Together we shine like stars in the night. We're a family, not just a show. Every click and comment makes us grow. Mods and chat, keeping the vibe so right. Together we shine like stars in the night. This digital world where emotion is shared, every post and reaction showing we care. The love is real in this virtual domain. With every sign, enjoys what we'll gain. We're a